Hey guys, Rick Stone here from Our Stony Acres. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be talking to you about vegetables that you can be growing in the shade. So we all have those shady spots in our garden, and I'm going to try and help you figure out what you can do about those shady spots and how you can still have some production come from those shady areas. Before we get started, please make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel. Click that notification bell so you get noticed every time I release new videos. Also, make sure you go over and follow us on Instagram. I'd love to have you join us there. And then stick around, because at the end of this video, I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about our year-round gardening mini course. In case you're interested right now, there's a link down in the description below. This is a free course that you can go check out to teach you more about growing year-round. Okay, so here's what we're going to do today. I am going to talk about growing in the shade, and I'm going to give you some advice here at the beginning. Maybe take a couple of minutes to do that, and then I'm going to actually go through the list. I've got about 30 plants that you can grow. If you're only here for the list, I broke this into chapters. You can just go click and it will direct you straight to that list, okay? All right, so we all have shady spots. I have 2 or 3 shady spots in my garden. In a perfect world, all of our gardens would have full sun, and full sun is normally 6 to 8 hours of sunlight a day. And that's what most plants really like to have in order to do their very best when they're growing. But we all have areas that don't get that much sun. And so how can we deal with those and still have some production and have some good things happening from those parts of the garden? As you're trying to select things to plant in those shady areas, here's a good rule of thumb to keep in mind. If you're growing the plant for its root or its fruit, it needs full sun. If you're growing it for its leaves or its immature flowers, then it'll actually do okay in shady spots, okay? So roots and fruits, that would be carrots and beets and things like that. And then fruits would be tomatoes and peppers and squash and cucumbers. All of those kind of things need full sun. They're just not going to do well in the shade, and so you need to prioritize your sunny spots for those. Now, if you're growing it for the leaf or the immature flowers, so the leaf would be all of our leafy greens, and then immature flowers would be things like broccoli or cauliflower or kohlrabi or any of those kind of things, then we can get away with a little bit more shade and less sun when we're growing those plants. Now, here's another thing that you need to keep in mind when we are talking about shade. We are not talking about complete shade here. We still need to get some sun in those areas. These are just shadier spots in our garden, okay? So really, in order to get any decent amount of production out of plants, they still need to get about 4 hours of sunlight a day. So when you're choosing these shady spots, make sure that there's still areas that at least get some sun in the morning or the afternoon, when when they kind of combined can get about that 4 hours, because even the shady plants are still going to need some sun. Okay, so keep that in mind. One other thing to keep in mind is lower your expectations. So things that grow in the shade are not going to do as well as the equivalent plant grown in the sun. So your lettuce plants are going to take longer to grow. They're not going to get as big. Your broccoli isn't going to do as well. Everything is going to kind of come down a notch because the plants are not getting as much sun as they could. And so lower your expectations and recognize that your production isn't going to be as good in the shady areas as it is in other areas. But there are some advantages to shade too, because we can grow things like lettuce and other leafy greens in the summertime in shady areas, because those areas are cooler, keep the temperatures down, and allow us to grow those cool season crops later into the year. So keep that in mind as well, okay? All right, so let's go through all of the different plants. And what I've done is kind of classified them based on what we use them for, essentially. And the first group of our plants is our salad greens. So these would be things that we would traditionally be putting in salads. So stuff like lettuce, spinach, arugula, minzua, endive, any of those leafy traditional salad ingredients are all going to do quite well in the shade. And you will be able to grow those later in the year than you normally would out in the main part of your garden, because the shade will offer a cooler environment for those cool season crops. So all of those are going to do really well. The next group is what I call the leafy greens. So leafy greens would be things like kale, collards, Swiss chard, sorrel, mustard greens, bok choy, and tatsoi. All of those also are going to do pretty good in those shady spots of your garden. Next would be our what we call the brassica family. So the brassica family is everything related to cabbage. So we're talking here about broccoli, broccoli rabe, cabbage, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, kohlrabi. All of those we're growing for their immature flowers, and those are going to do pretty well in the shade. And in fact, the shade will actually help extend your growing season a little bit there, again, because those are cool season crops that are going to do better in a little bit of a cooler area. So those should do fine in the shade as well. Okay, next are some vegetables that don't really fit into the traditional classifications that I talked about earlier. But over the years, I've found that these plants do okay in the shade. Okay, remember again, lower your expectations on these, but they will still do all right in the shade and you'll get some production from them. So this is things like celery, peas, beans, leeks, green onions, garlic, and then also potatoes. I'm really cautious to put potatoes on this list. The one thing that you need to recognize with potatoes, growing them in the shade, is you are not going to get big potatoes, okay? So just recently, I've got this little shady bed over here by my peach tree, and a couple of years ago, we grew potatoes in it just to see how they would do. The plants looked very nice. They grew tall and everything, but we only got little potatoes. So we never got any big, fully developed potatoes. We only got just the kind of the little smaller baby potatoes. And that was at full maturity throughout the whole season. So keep that in mind, okay? And then the last group that will do really well in the shade are your herbs. So your herbs should, all of those should do pretty well. Anything that's kind of the leafy type. So mint, chives, cilantro, oregano, parsley, basil, all of those will do really well in those shady areas, okay? Now, what do? I have two really shady spots in my yard. One of them is actually kind of just right over here behind me. You can't quite see it in the frame, but my peach tree was there first, and then we put in this raised bed that you can see over here, and the peach tree kind of shades the south half of this bed, and so it doesn't get a lot of sun. In that bed, last year we tried some potatoes. We've grown lots of leafy greens in that area, and they have all done really well. In fact, this year, if you look really close in this cutaway video, we're actually growing summer crisp lettuces in this bed. So those will do really well. We're just getting them started here in June, and they should do really nicely in that bed all through the summer for us. The other shady spot that we have in our yard is this about 18-inch wide bed that runs all the way along the rock wall that's on the south end of our property. That bed doesn't get a lot of sun, especially during the daytime. It gets some morning sun and it gets some afternoon sun, nothing during the middle of the day. And so that is a great spot for us to grow herbs, and we grow a lot of leafy greens there. We've done kale and collards and Swiss chard all along there, and those do really well. And in fact, we wait until now in June to plant those so that we kind of have a second planting of those leafy greens during the summertime. So you can be successful in those shady spots. You just need to remember a few things. Now, a couple of other pointers for you. Watering is an issue in your shady spots. Make sure that you lower the amount of water in those shady spots. If you've got an automated system at all that's watering your garden, make sure that you adjust for those shady areas, because they're not going to need as much water, because there's not going to be as much evaporation in that area. The other thing is watch out for pest issues. Those plants are going to be struggling a little bit more anyways, and then it's a shady, cool spot. Lots of pests are going to like to hang out there, and so you will struggle a little bit more with pests in a shady area. And then again, your maturity dates are going to be a lot longer. So a lettuce that normally takes 45 days to mature in the sun is probably going to take 60 or 70 days to mature in the shade. And so lower your expectations on time frames and on harvest when you're growing in the shade, okay? All right. That's all I have for you for today. Before we go, though, I wanted to make sure that you knew about our free year-round gardening mini course that is available right now. If you go down in the description, there's a link that you can click on to go sign up for that course. It's available year-round, so if you're watching this video a little bit later on in the year, it's available now as well. But in June and July, we put a big promotion on year-round gardening because that's the time that you need to start thinking about your fall and winter garden. I know that sounds weird, but it's actually the time that you need to start thinking about your fall and winter garden is June and July, because you're going to start planting in August. So go check out that free mini course. You can sign up for it, and it's a great little course that I think you're going to enjoy, about 45 minutes long, and I'd love to have you come over and join that course, okay? All right, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel. Click the notification bell so you get noticed every time I release new videos. Make sure you go follow us over on Instagram as well. I'd love to have you join us there. Thanks for sticking around till the end of the video and for being a Stoney Acres subscriber. Happy gardening.